Counselor, but can you just help me with your first and last name before we get started?
Tom DeVore, D-E-V-O-R-E.
With which firm?
DeVore Law Offices.
Okay, great. Representative, we've discussed this at some length here already, but again, can you describe what was your injury?
Well, my injury was my freedoms were being trampled on. Because see, I believe that we here in America, it's dangerous when one person takes it upon themselves to make the rules for everyone else, and I began to contest that after the original 30-day proclamation of emergency had expired, and began to look into it, and then I realized that we got problems here, and then I began to realize and find that there's these mechanisms in place to already take care of this. You know, the Illinois Department of Public Health has it's called a pandemic emergency plan, and it's in place, and it spells this to a T how to take care of this.
There seems to be some question or debate in this courtroom today about whether or not the governor has the power to extend his disaster proclamation every 30 days. But
Right.
there is no question that I'm aware of, about whether or not the governor has absolute power to call the General Assembly to emergency session.
Correct.
Should he do that to remedy this question?
I don't think it's necessary right now, because what he needs to do is honor Illinois law and what is already in place with the Illinois Department of Public Health. That's what he should do. I mean, that's why we have these plans in place.
So let's play that out. Do you have any reason to think Dr. Ezike, who heads the Department of Public Health, wouldn't do exactly what Governor Pritzker is doing? She's advising him.
Yeah. So I'm very concerned, because we're not getting the facts, we're not getting the numbers, they're not telling many things that we've asked for. We're not getting, even me as a legislator, things that I've asked for. How many times do we see her on a press conference being asked questions, and she doesn't have? I can't think of anything right now off the top of my head, but several times we can go back and watch that. She doesn't have the answers that I feel are critical for her to know or for her to have. We've spent, what I do know is here's what I know, and this maybe has affected me as much or more than anything as a state representative. Every day I've got people calling in this office. They're out of work. They can't get through. They cannot get through. What the governor what he's got complete control of is the IDES. Is to help with this unemployment crisis. As of about a week ago, we had for every infected person, we knew the number showed there was probably 300 people. This is across the United States. 300 people unemployed. And for every death, there was 500 people unemployed. And probably what prompted me more than anything to begin to research and look and push this was the fact that I'm tired of hearing grown men call here with their family and their kids screaming in the background, scared to death. What do we do? Mm-hmm. We've got I haven't even been able to get through to unemployment. My checking account is upside down. What do we do? Yeah. And we've been pushing for answers. If the legislature, the governor can do that. And maybe the legislator needs to come in, to reconvene for that. But they're not. Everybody's sitting on their hands on the sidelines, and that's not what this country's about.
And I don't at all. I totally understand that this is costing a lot of people a lot of harm in very real ways. The judge said so today.
Right.
I guess my question is, aren't you making the case in saying that the statute and the pandemic preparedness plan, or whatever that was called,
yes,
doesn't that allow the state under a different arm or a different agency to effectively do the same thing?
Effectively what it does is boil it right down to the county health department. That's what it does. And if the county, go ahead.
And there's standards in there that I would like to point out, because the Illinois Department of Public Health, through the Department of Public Health Act, that is a law that was passed by the legislature to put in place this process to deal with these types of pandemics. The 120-page plan is specific to these types of pandemics. I don't see us finding ourselves facing a situation to where that process that was put in place by the legislature is not working. That process, again, it has been now delegated down to the local level, where they can then quarantine people. There are regulations within that plan. There's constitutional protections within the statute of whether or not it's reasonable for someone to be quarantined or isolated, and that's why the protections of due process. The executive orders of the governor are exponentially more complicated, and they don't give the people the ability to easily represent themselves.
The governor's office has said they're going to appeal immediately. What say you?
And they can appeal themselves, and again, they can take up the issue of whether or not the governor solely on his own putting out edicts, what I call them, executive fiat to control this situation. I would ask the governor to have his attorneys go into the 1920s and look at the Illinois Supreme Court cases that dealt with the typhoid virus, and those cases seem to be pretty clear that this issue is meant to be addressed by the legislative branch and not the executive branch. Thank you.
And Representative, I know you right now are the only one of 12.7 million people in Illinois free to do whatever you want, go wherever you want in Illinois under this executive order right now. But I wonder, you didn't dispute there's a disaster. You don't dispute that there's some danger out there. Maybe you just disagree about the degree of the danger. But I wonder if you have any concern about the signal this might send to open the door to a bunch of people to just sort of disregard this order. Do you fear that may increase the risk? Because the governor said today, I only read his comments, that this legal action of yours, I'm paraphrasing him, will put people's lives at risk.
So for 2 solid months now, people have been setting in either fear, concern. This is what we do here. When we see a wrong, somebody has got to step up and call it out, because if we don't, that's what scares me. What's going to happen the next time if we don't address this now? It's going to keep getting just a little bit longer and a little bit broader, and I think we've seen that. I've studied that many times in the history books, and I do not like what that looks like.
And I guess my last question would be, did you have any reaction to the governor's, or I guess the Attorney General's argument that indeed they believe their power to continue to declare executive authority every 30 days was indefinite?
So no, I didn't, and that's why I filed this. We held on to this, talked about it,
Sorry,
and waited.
I was looking for your reaction to their argument, saying we believe we do have indefinite power to declare this every 30 days.
Yeah,
That's their stance.
Yeah, and that didn't surprise me. That's why I filed this. I waited until he re-upped the stay to the end of May, and when he did that, enough's enough. I'd been on the phone with him. I've talked with Lieutenant Governor Stratton. I've been sending emails, phone calls, messages, text, and I have been suggesting all along that this needs to be, you need to regionalize it.
And that the coffee shop right here does reopen tomorrow?
No, not necessarily. That's up to I think the Clay County Health Department could determine that based on the health scare that is here. That's how the law is designed.
So you're not advising your voters, your
No, absolutely. I'm not going to do anything different than what I have been doing. I've got my parents are at home. They don't want to get out. They're, they have health concerns, and that's perfectly fine.
But you can do that now, free of any potential repercussions by the executive branch. That's the huge difference.
Right. There you go. Thank you.
This issue of the disaster, which the Attorney General brought up, I think is something that needs to be appreciated by the people that view this. The Illinois Emergency Management Act talks about a disaster, and when a disaster occurs, that gives the governor the ability to declare a proclamation disaster, and that then invokes Section 7 that gives him emergency powers for 30 days. There is nothing in that statute that says that a disaster proclamation has to last for 30 days. A disaster proclamation can last as long as that disaster exists if you don't artificially put a limit of 30 days in the proclamation disaster. My suggestion would be for the people to consider, if those proclamation disasters are putting 30-day limitations in them that they don't need, that's being done artificially to give the office of governor the ability to re-energize those emergency powers every 30 days. The question that never got answered, and it will get answered at the next phase of this when it deals with disaster, is when there's some testimony put on, maybe by the director of the Board of Health, is what was the disaster on March 9th? It was COVID-19. What was the disaster on April 1st? It was COVID-19. It's the same disaster. So to say that I can call something one disaster for 30 days and then at the end of that 30 days call that same disaster a new disaster, in my opinion, the court should not read that as a continuing thing. It's one disaster. The 30 days should apply one time. Thank you.
Thank you.